G'day legends, Mick here from Fin to Fin. Today I'm just going to do a discussion on water changes. I do get asked a lot about how I maintain all my tanks, cleaning, water changes and so on. And so I was just going to have a chat about what I do. I don't do a lot, so and obviously it's one of those subjects that I don't know if you'll ever get the right or wrong answer. Everyone does it different. So what I do first of all I use is sponge filters. So this is all I've got, the old standard sponge filter. Whatever brand is available I'll buy, doesn't bother me. But I've got some Aqua ones sitting here which I need to set up, so that one's out to look at. But as you can see, I've got sponge filters, usually the big ones in the 2-foot tanks, and quite often the sponge filter will just replicate the size of the tank, small filter, and so on. So that's what I use. I did have substrate, I got rid of it. I'm going back to substrate because I find the bare banks, like the bare base, is just quite boring and just doesn't look good. So I am going back to putting gravel. These new tanks as I've set up, as you can see. So, but anyway, back on the water changes. So what I do is I generally don't do a huge amount of water changes on the tanks. When I first set up a tank like this from scratch, I will probably do a water change every week for the first month, just while a tank is cycling, and I will add just a pair of guppies or something, just a couple of fish. So there is some fish in there, so there is some food getting put in there, so we can start getting that tank to cycle. So this bank has been here for 6 days now, 7 days. Last weekend I think I did it. So I'll probably drop one pair of fish now. After 1 week I'll drop a pair of fish in all of these, and I'll do a water change. Now my water changes are only, I have a 10 litre bucket that I use, and I only fill that. So generally these are dropped down with, just your natural, what you lose in your tanks, and then I do a water change generally down to about here, because that will drop down, and that's all I do. And I will do that anywhere from, on average, every 2 to 3 weeks. Sometimes it could be a month, and I've had no issues doing that at all. If a tank is overloaded with fish and really getting a little bit, maybe say, look at that tank gets a lot of fish in it, I'd probably be more inclined to make sure I did it on the 2-week mark. But in all honesty, the water changes for me, I actually lose more fish when I do a water change. Like, it's not uncommon to find a couple of dead fish in the tanks when I go through and do the whole lot. So just say I'm doing a water change in 70 or 80 tanks, quite often the next day there'll be a couple of dead fish. If I don't do the water changes, no dead fish. So it's realistically, you could say that I didn't need to do them. I don't test my water at all. I have not tested any tanks in here since I started this room, and I don't have a great intention of doing it. So if the fish are healthy, you kind of tell. If I look at the tank and the fish don't look quite right, I'll do a water change, but generally that is all I'm doing. So obviously different people, if you're keeping cichlids, Oscars, like larger fish, I can't tell you what you'd have to do, because I've never kept them. So all I've kept is a lot of small fish, live bearers, your platies, your swordtails, your guppies, a few small cichlids like the German rams and things like that, rice fish, Corydoras, angelfish would be the biggest fish that I have here. And yeah, I just don't do water changes that often. These small tanks have quite often easily gone a month without a water change, and I haven't had any. I think at one stage there, I think the longest I left most of these tanks was up to 6 weeks, and I had no issues at all. But again, small fish, probably not a huge amount of fish in the tank. Some are getting a little bit, you know, crowded now, but it's still probably not a huge amount when you look at the size of the fish, stuff like that. So I'd love to see in the comments what other people do. That's what I do, that's what works for me. I'm actually thinking I probably don't even need to do it 2 to 3 weekly. I'm kind of leaning towards doing it once a month, just for the fact that each time I do a water change I quite often lose a few fish, so that tells me that it was probably okay and I didn't need to do it. But there's so much different information out there on what people do. Obviously I try to have a lot of weed in my tanks, and I also have the plants, and I want one of them in every tank because obviously that root system comes down, helps remove your nitrates and ammonia and things like that. So yeah, that's what I do. It is nothing spectacular, very simple. Not saying this is going to work for everyone. Depending on your tank size, what fish you're keeping, how many you got, what filter system you're running. Like a lot of these tanks, I do actually have 2 sponge filters going in them. There's the other side's only got 1, but I generally will put 2 in most of them over time, just so if one packs up or anything like that. And I'll just randomly clean them every now and then. They don't get cleaned too often, to be honest. Yeah, so water changes will come down to about, gets to the bottom of these black things, so to about there. So when you look at that, it's not a huge water change, it's probably only 20%, 30% say, at most. And it seems to work for me. As for cleaning the tanks, I've never cleaned a single tank. I've not cleaned glass, inside or out, as you can probably tell. But the tanks do seem to stay in reasonably good condition. There's a couple that look like they were getting some algae, but it hasn't really gone any further. So at this stage the water changes are working. Something to probably play around with. I've probably got to do them differently for a small tank like this maybe, although these tanks are probably only going to have 1 betta fish in them, so realistically probably won't do any different up there. It'll be a very small water change. So when it wasn't that long ago, all I had was these small tanks, and the same thing. I wasn't even doing water changes. Once the water levels had just dropped, I was just topping them up for a long time, and then I did start losing a couple of fish here and there, but the tanks were getting crowded, breeding, and I was starting to get a few issues. So I just started doing probably 25% water changes every fortnight on the small tanks. It was probably a bit overkill, and it ended up being about once a month, and everything went pretty well. So I'll probably do the same with these up here because they're in a prick of a spot. So, but yeah, that's it. Even a tank like this, which is loaded, it's I'm not sure what the date is today, 21st maybe, something like that. And the last water change here was done on the 1st of the 6th. So it's been 20 days since this tank's had a water change. It has been topped up. Last night I actually topped all these tanks up because they were all down a bit, because I had a busy weekend and I knew I wasn't going to get out here to do my water changes. So while it was due for it, it's probably going to be pushed out a week. So yeah, but that's it. I would love some comments on what other people do, especially for tank sizes that I have, and what they keep. Because like these tanks here, I want to put some better fish in, so they're going to be a little bit different. They might require more water changes. We'll wait and see. But yeah, I do recommend the plants, obviously. These Pothos is mainly what I use. They seem to do really well with these root systems, really help. I think they look pretty cool as well, good spot for fish to hide, but that helps take away a few of the nasties. And obviously I try to have plants, not always just a Anubis, it's Anubis nana I think. It's mainly the main one I use because it seems to do well in my conditions, but I'll always have your hornworts and milfoil. I've got most of my tanks, as you know, duckweed, but everything plays a part. in helping the water and minimising water changes. So that's the way I look at it. Once again, this is what works for me. Please don't think this is what you have to do, because everyone is different. I've seen what other people do. I know my brother's got tanks. I think he does water changes every week. I know other people that don't do water changes. I know people that do them weekly, fortnightly, religiously, no matter what. I'm quite the opposite. I get pretty slack, and I can easily go a month without doing water changes on any of these tanks, and I don't lose any fish. Unfortunately, I'll probably then think I need to do a water change. I do them, and then I lose a few fish. So it's one of those things. It's a touchy subject. So you do what works for you over time. I watched the one channel. I watched a few videos from, I think it's Aquarium Co-op in America, and they had a really good one on water changes where he discussed setting up a new tank, what to look for and things like that. So I recommend watching that if you haven't already. Get on there and have a look at what they recommend and work out what works for you and go from there. So yeah, that's it. So very interesting subject. Please leave a comment on what you do, how often you do your water changes. I would actually like to hear that. Do you lose fish when you do your water changes? You start losing fish if you haven't done them after a certain amount of time. What fish do you keep? Things like that. Obviously it all plays a part. But yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Please subscribe, like, definitely comment, because I'll read them and I will reply. That's a guarantee. And yeah, and enjoy. And have a great weekend, everyone. Cheers.